Welcome back. Glad you could join us. We're going to continue our study of the wilderness wandering and the problem of complaining. And before we dive into our lesson tonight, let's consider again 1 Corinthians 10, which is our theme for this lesson. We must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. The Bible is full of great examples for us to learn from, and one such example that is very stark is the example of the wilderness wandering with the Israelites. And today we want to talk about the wrong priorities that they had, which led them to continue to wander in the wilderness for several years. And so we'll begin in Numbers chapter 13 and 14 with the story of the 12 spies. Moses sends in spies to spy out the land. Where should we go first? And he sends one person for every tribe of Israel. So there's 12 spies altogether. And as the story goes, there's a mixed bag of reports. Verse 25, at the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron, all the congregation of the people of Israel, in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them to all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are very strong, and cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negeb, Hittites, the Jebusites, Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are all able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him had said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. So 10 spies saw the land and saw that it was good, but the people in there were great. They were established, and compared to the wandering Israelites, they were fortified. They had cities, they had armies, and the 10 spies understanding there's no way they could beat them. But there were 2 faithful spies on the other side who said, God's brought us through worse things than this. We can definitely go in there right now and take it if we wanted to. Unfortunately, the people listened again to complaining, and this led to really bad unintended consequences. Numbers 14 and verse 1. And then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we have died in the land of Egypt, or that we would have died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. We've heard this a few times, right? Back when they first left Egypt, they said, we don't have any food and water. Why'd you bring us out here to die? And then God provided for them. And then the similar thing, every step they took when things got rough. Oh, woe is me. It's awful for us. And God eventually, again, provided for them. This time, they're on the edge of the promised land. And because they have a bad report from some people, so all of a sudden, I've forgotten what God can do. Oh no, woe is me. And they lead an uprising, a coup, against Moses and their leaders. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the people of Israel. Joshua the son of Nun, Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones. And so because this people listened to a few negative reports, that led to a full-blown rebellion against Moses and Israel's leaders. The people were so upset that they cried all night, and then the next day they rose up and they tried to stone all their leaders with rocks to go back to Egypt, the place that they were in captivity. But then God intervenes. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones, but the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel. The Lord said to Moses, how long will this people despise me? And how long will they not believe in me, in spite of all the signs I have done among them? I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them. I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. So this is the second time that God's offered this to Moses. The first time at Mount Sinai when he said, these people have already abandoned me. You know what? we're going to start clean. You're going to be my chosen person, and I'm going to make of you a great nation. And Moses says, but you can't do that. What will they say about you? And you promised the land to these people. And amazingly, Moses is going to do the exact same thing for the people here. I got to say, this is amazing, because if this was you or me, I would bet anything that we would say, absolutely, Lord, let's start all over again. I'm done with this. I've been with these people decades and they're still complaining, and I did everything for them. I can't take any more. Let's hit the reset button. Moses has some great patience and is very humble before God. And so God lets them go, but there is a consequence, and it's not a pretty picture. Then the Lord said, I have pardoned according to your word, but truly as I live, and as the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test, those 10 times have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give their fathers, and none of those who despise me shall see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land into which he went. His descendants shall possess it. So the story goes that God makes the Israelites wander 40 more years in the wilderness until all that unfaithful, griping, complaining generation dies off. And make no mistake, this whole situation was due because the people complained and grumbled against the Lord. We see the same situation in Numbers 16, 2 chapters later, where they lead another rebellion because the people were fighting against the Lord and they were complaining. And as we read in 1 Corinthians 10, the Lord dealt justice to them as well. And there are so many lessons we can learn from Israel's short-sightedness and their selfishness and their complaining here. Here's one lesson. Negativity can destroy the best plans and intentions. Think about how easily swayed we are from happy to just desperately depressed because a few people say that things are bad. That's what happened to Israel here. Most people said we can't go in there, and 2 people said, no, God's brought us out of here. We can do this. And it went to their heads, and they got in their own heads about it, and all of a sudden they're leading a revolt. The philosopher Seneca had a great quote on this exact subject. He said that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. And that's what's happening here to the Israelites. They're making these Canaanites much bigger of a problem than is in reality. And even before they cross over into that land, already they've been defeated. We do the same thing so often. Before we even begin an adventure, then we're already on our back foot because we convinced ourselves we simply can't do it. Consider for a moment evangelism. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people about evangelism and talked to people about their faith, and the first thing they say is, I've tried. You know, I've done it and it's not working. And people today, they just don't want to hear it. And I'm trying it. It's just a different world we're living in now, and you just don't get it. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. Consider and compare that to what Israel just said to God. God said, go over, I've given you this land, and it's yours. All you got to do is walk in and take it. And they said, oh, we can't. God's abandoned us. We can't do it anymore. I've tried. It's not going to work. And God punished them. Think about what that means for us. In Matthew 28, Jesus says, go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples. And essentially he says, I've won the world. I've overcome this. All you have to do is go in there and take the world. So if we look at Jesus and say, well, Jesus, it's just not working out. I mean, I can't do it. Are we in the same situation as the Israelites? The second lesson that we can take away from this is that the Israelites made this situation about them and not God. It's all that I can do, and in my strength I can't overcome these people, but they missed the point. This whole thing, this whole adventure they're on was not really about them as much as it was about God. God had promised this land to their ancestors. God had made all these things possible, and all of a sudden when it comes time for action and we got to really bear down and do this, all of a sudden we can't do it because I'm not strong enough. That's not the point. That's never been the point for us. As Christians, our strength comes from God. He allows us to do things that we could not do on our own. Instead of worrying about my limitations, let's worry about God's limitations and stop putting limitations on ourselves and His church. And that leads us to number 3. When we do face trials and difficulties, let's remember who God really is. God led these people out of Egypt, made them cross the Red Sea. He provided them through the wilderness. He's done all these amazing miracles and signs to give them confidence and trust in Him, and they still couldn't do it. And it's easier for you and me to sit here and say, well, if I was there, I would have believed. If I was there, I would have listened to God. I wouldn't have rebelled. Maybe that's not exactly the case. We would like to believe that, but maybe not. Hasn't God given us His Son? How gut-wrenching would the situation have been for someone like Moses or like Joshua? They did everything right, and they stood up for what's right, and then God says you have to wait 40 more years. And he discontinued that whole generation because they were unfaithful and they were complaining grumblers. And I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that God would do the same thing in our situation. As God's church now, let's dedicate ourselves to straightening our priorities out, focusing completely on God, avoiding complaining, and seeing the big picture He's put out for us. It's about Him, not about us.